A couple of years ago, I was involved in a online conference with some of the greats for underwater habitats. It was Jan Koblik, Sylvia Earle, James Miller, among others that were there. And it was a very long conference, and we talked about a bunch of different things. But this here is a real quick little synopsis of what that was. Also, I'll link below the whole video on that if you'd like to go back and watch that as well.
Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendan Traxler.
Okay, get ready to dive deep today, like really deep. We're going underwater. Underwater habitats.
Those structures designed to let humans live and work underwater for long stretches.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got a ton of fascinating material to get through. Conference transcripts, project proposals, historical accounts. We even found some old sea monster stories.
It'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Our mission today is to explore underwater living past, present, and future.
What I find fascinating is how this all connects to so many other things. Space exploration, marine conservation, even tourism. It's a surprisingly deep topic, no pun intended.
I know, right? And it all starts with this wild image. I dug up this sea dragon from some old pamphlet from 1693, supposedly terrorized sailors in the Baltic Sea.
Oh, I've seen that one. Crazy, right?
Can you imagine being out on the open ocean and seeing that?
It really shows how people used to view the ocean. This place of mystery and fear, full of monsters. Today, we're starting to see it differently. Not a barrier, but as a new frontier. A place for exploration and discovery.
Absolutely. And now, centuries later, those sea monster stories have been replaced by real science.
Right. And we're seeing this renewed interest in underwater living, like a new generation picking up where those early explorers left off.
Totally. They're even asking some really big questions these days. What if we could build more than just temporary labs?
What if people could live and work underwater for months or even years at a time?
I like the way you think. We actually have transcripts here from a recent conference called Seafloor Habitat 2.0 Ignition Con, where experts are predicting we're on the edge of a revolution in underwater living.
It's not just science fiction anymore.
Not at all.
We're seeing a real shift from those early habitats, which were mostly about short-term research. This new generation is being designed for much longer stays.
That makes sense.
And not just that, they're going to be used for a much wider range of things. There's even a focus on human well-being in these new designs. It's a whole new ballgame.
It's really incredible when you think about it. And, this isn't even a new idea. We've got accounts here from Jacques Cousteau's Conshelf project, an underwater village back in 1964, before we even landed on the moon.
Wow, 1964.
Those pioneers were way ahead of their time. It makes you wonder why we haven't made more progress since then.
Well, that's what we're going to find out as we dig deeper today. Building a livable space underwater has its own very unique challenges. But before we get into those, let's talk about why this even matters. Why should people even care about underwater habitats?
It's easy to think about underwater habitats as being so far in the future, But then you read about those early attempts and realize we still have so much to figure out.
Oh, absolutely. Like, take a look at Calamar Park. That's a proposed underwater habitat designed by Martin Henk.
I know that one.
Yeah, and it's remarkable how he took the time to really address the shortcomings of those previous underwater habitats. He really went back to the drawing board.
His analysis blew me away. A lot of those past habitats were almost set up for failure right from the start. They weren't mobile, you couldn't change them easily, and they definitely weren't designed with people actually living there long-term in mind.
Right, and the financial struggles? Don't even get me started.
Forget about it.
Imagine if your house was stuck in one spot,
Yeah.
you couldn't add on to it, and it cost a fortune just to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
That was the reality for a lot of those early habitats.
Yeah, not a recipe for success.
Not at all. It made them totally unsustainable in the long run.
So back to Calamar Park, it addresses these issues head on.
Exactly.
This one is designed to be modular. They can change it around, add or remove pieces. It's semi-permanent too. And honestly, it kind of reminds me of the International Space Station, like an underwater version.
Henke actually called it the underwater ISS.
I love that.
It's a pretty perfect comparison.
And it makes sense, right? Remember how the space station has all these different modules that connect together?
Yep.
Well, Calamar Park uses a similar concept. There's a central corridor,
Yeah.
and you can just attach different habitat units depending on what you need them for. So, need a lab. Boom. Attach a lab module. Need more space for people to live. No problem. Just connect another habitat module. It's like adult underwater Legos.
That's a great way to put it. And think about how customizable it is.
Yeah.
It changes depending on who's going down there and what they're doing.
It's brilliant, really. But what really struck me about Calamar Park was Henke's overall goal. He doesn't just want one habitat. He wants to create a whole European underwater research center, like the whole shebang.
That's where things get really interesting. Imagine that this central hub for everybody, scientists, engineers, even tourists, all working together and pushing the boundaries of what's possible underwater.
It's an amazing idea, but let's be real, something that big, that takes money. A lot of it.
Money. You're telling me, even underwater, we can't escape the laws of economics.
It's the one constant, right?
Yeah, sadly. But Henke gets it. He emphasizes this whole idea of making sure these habitats can be used for more than just one specific thing, like astronaut training. He uses that as a prime example. Turns out the ocean is a phenomenal place to mimic the challenges of outer space.
Really? How so?
Well, think about it. You're in this small space. The environment is extreme. You're isolated from everything. All things astronauts have to deal with.
Huh, when you put it like that, it makes total sense.
Astronauts need somewhere to train. So why not underwater?
It's a win-win, right? You're advancing space exploration and underwater research at the same time.
Now you're getting it. And that's just one example. There are so many potential applications for these habitats. It's about creating an ecosystem of activity, research, development, maybe even some commercial opportunities down the line. All of that ensures this whole thing is sustainable long-term.
It's about building an underwater city, not just a temporary little outpost.
Now you're talking. And, it's not just about the practical parts of this, how to build them, how to pay for them, all of that. It's also about understanding how living beneath the waves for a long time would affect us.
The human side of things.
Exactly. Jim Miller, one of the early underwater habitat pioneers, talks about this a lot. He said, we need to study what happens to people after they've been down there for a long time, not just these quick little trips. We need to know how extended stays underwater affect us, both our bodies and our minds.
I never thought about it like that.
It's like the difference between a weekend getaway and moving to a new country. The longer you're there, the more immersed you become in the culture, the challenges, everything. It changes you, sometimes in ways you never expect.
I can see that.
And the ocean. That's a whole other world down there. Different rules, different rhythms. We need to understand how we fit into that.
So we've talked about the challenges of living underwater and the potential benefits. But what I really want to know is what's it like? Like, what do these aquanauts actually experience down there?
Yeah, those personal stories, those are really something. You get a glimpse into a whole other world.
Exactly.
We actually have an account here from Sylvia Earle, legendary oceanographer, spent 2 weeks living underwater. She talks about this incredible feeling of slowing down, really being able to observe marine life up close. And from that, coming away with this totally new understanding of how those creatures behave.
Just like stepping into their world.
Exactly.
That reminds me of something we have from Brendan Traxler. He's the founder of Atlantis Sea Colony. He wrote about spending 24 hours in Jules Undersea Lodge, the underwater hotel.
I've heard of that place.
And get this, he says it was actually really comfortable.
No way.
Yeah, he even said it was relatively cheap considering the whole, living underwater thing.
Wow.
It's amazing how far things have come.
Yeah, you should read Alan's experience in Hydrolab sometime. One of those early habitats back in the 70s. Let's just say it was a bit more rustic back then.
Oh, how so?
Think exploding tea kettles, tiny little hatches you practically had to squeeze through, and something called, I'm not kidding, terminal acne, caused by the high humidity.
You're kidding me.
I'm not. But even with all that, just like Traxler, Alan still talks about this feeling of wonder, being completely immersed in this whole other world, separate from everything else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's something that comes up again and again in these accounts. It's not just the physical experience of being underwater, it's the mental and emotional impact too. This alien environment surrounding you. It's profound, life-changing even.
It reminds me of when astronauts talk about the overview effect. seeing Earth from space and how it changes their whole perspective.
Oh, totally. Like seeing the interconnectedness
Yeah.
of everything.
Exactly. So maybe being underwater can have a similar effect, this awe for our planet that you just can't get anywhere else.
Absolutely. It's like you're seeing firsthand how everything in the ocean is connected.
And that brings us back to why this whole thing matters.
Uh-huh.
Underwater habitats, they aren't just about scientific discovery. It's bigger than that. It's about expanding what we know about ourselves and our place in all of this.
I like that.
It's about pushing boundaries, testing our limits, discovering new possibilities. I mean, we've seen how these habitats can change how we study the ocean, how we get ready for space travel. They could even be essential for ocean conservation efforts.
I totally agree.
But even more than that, I think they give us this unique perspective on life itself. And maybe, just maybe, they can inspire us to take better care of our planet.
I hope so.
So here's something to think about. If we can build a space station out in orbit, why not an undersea village? What do you think the future holds for humanity beneath the waves? It's a big question, and I don't have all the answers, but I hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on the possibilities.